I was born in Denver, Colorado. Was real close to my grandmother. My mom divorced my first stepdad in 1970 and remarried my second stepdad in 1972. They went to Kansas for their honeymoon, came home and said, guess what, we're moving. And that's when I moved to Kansas, was in 1972. My great-grandparents were Baptists, and so we went to the Baptist church for a while. And then when my mom split from my first stepdad, I spent Saturdays with my grandma. She was a Sunday school teacher in the Free Church in Denver, and I would help her with the flannel grafts. And so I grew up in the church. My mom was diagnosed with cancer in 1988, and it was in her thyroid, and it was a very fast growing cancer. And one night she couldn't breathe, and my dad rushed her to Holdridge, and the doctor had to put a trach in her throat so she could breathe. And when he cut in to do the trach, he sent the mass to her lungs, and she ended up with lung cancer and went through chemo, radiation, everything the doctors had suggested for her. I moved back home in October of '89, and my mom passed in April of '90. And in June, Kelly was in Kansas working for an oil company, and we met. And in September, then I was pregnant with Nick. Had Nick in '91, Karen in '93, and then Kaylee was born in '96. So in 2011, January 21st, Karen woke up to get her and Kaylee up for school, and she come in and she says, Mom, Kaylee's not in her room. And I'm like, well, see if she's on the couch. And she's not. And I said, well, call your dad and see if he took her to McDonald's for breakfast. So we called Kelly, and he didn't have her. And I immediately called the police because I knew something wasn't right. We'd gone in her room, and the back door was ajar because she had a sliding glass door in her room. Started calling all of her friends. I thought maybe she went over to her boyfriend's house. So we went over to his house. Kelly searched the entire house in case she was hiding somewhere, and she wasn't. That entire day was full of chaos and activity. I'd gone to the school. I gathered all of her friends in the principal's office, told them, none of you are in trouble, but if you know where she is, tell us. And all day long, we were going through all of her papers in her room. Her dad was out looking for her. He had stopped where now we know Stathis's aunt, Stathis was the perpetrator, where his aunt was working to get his phone number. And about 10 o'clock that morning, Kelly had called Stathis and asked if he had talked to her, and he said no, but it didn't set right with Kelly, so he called me, and it just happened at that time that Detective Kinney and the police officer was in my house, and he's like, this isn't right. So I gave the phone to the officer, and he took Stathis's number down. He called Stathis, and Stathis's story changed right away. So that was a telltale sign that something wasn't right. And so Stathis went to the police station. At that time, it was about 6 o'clock at night, and then he never left. And Detective Kinney got out of him where Kaylee was, and then that's when we knew that she was gone. Definitely was a lot of grieving, and I definitely miss her, but she was so impactful to the kids that she hung around with, and to even a lot of adults. She always befriended the kids who didn't have friends. If you were the new kid in town, she wanted to be your friend right away. And she was the one that was like, come on, Mom, let's go to church. Come on, Mom, let's pray before our meals. She was the one that was always prompting. After I moved back to Holdridge in 2016, it was changing my life. I quit doing the drugs, and God was prompting me to go to church. I drove into the church parking lot several times and never got out and went, so I decided Easter service, I would know exactly what time it started, where it was going to be, and I absolutely knew that that was a sermon that I needed to hear. The pastor said one thing. He says, sometimes God allows what he hates so he can accomplish what he loves. And I was like, there it is. There's a reason. So I started reading my Bible, and Kara and I had taken a road trip, and we were discussing how I felt the Lord was prompting me to forgive Stathis for what he did. And it's hard to explain. I was hurt and I miss Kaylee, but I was never really angry about it. It was weird to me because I felt like I should be angry about it, but I wasn't. And, God says pray for your enemies, and people say pray they get what they deserve, but I think that's not right. I think we should pray for their salvation. And so I started praying for Stathis, that God would send someone into his life, because what a story he would have if God changed his entire life. And so I forgave him. And it was a little bit harder to forgive his family because I felt they should have known better. But eventually that has come a ways too. I have forgiven their participation in the way they treated us. Versus this past week where forgive as Christ has forgiven you. And then I was watching a video describing Jesus' death, and even on the cross, dying, those people mocking him, he asked the Father to forgive them. And so forgiveness is so important because Christ forgives us, and I know I've done terrible things in my life, and he's forgiven me, and I need to allow that to the people that have affected me in my life. So in high school, I was involved in youth group, Teens for Christ, took my Bible to school, had prayer group before school, but it was all about show. Look what I'm doing. I'm better than you. I'm carrying my Bible. I'm going to church. And the minute I moved out of my family home and moved to Salina, Kansas, when I was 19 after I graduated out of high school, I fell instantly. Started going to the bars, drinking, using drugs. So it was all surface, no real roots. I wasn't standing on the rock. And the same thing in 2002 when I went into recovery and doing the Bible studies and going to church. I was patting myself on the back. Look what I'm doing. Look what I'm doing. I have 2 years clean. I have 3 years clean. The difference between then and now is what Christ has done in my life. It's not about what I'm doing. It's what he's doing. The chains that he's breaking, the people that he's bringing into my life to support me so I can support others. And it has nothing to do with what I do. It's what he does. I've just let God work through my life and give him all the glory, because absolutely nothing I can do worked, because if it's about me, I'm going to be right back where I was.